Oops.
Double under. Va bene. Thank you. You just visualize. You have two more. Mute your microphone. Oh, that's all.
Can members of the public hear us?
Joe.
I can hear you, but it's an echo.
Is that better, Joe?
Some one of your speakers.
Okay, turn mine right now.
So what's going on? You speak.
All right.
That should be better.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, try Joe again. Joe, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Teresa.
Great. All right, thank you. Thank you all for being here. So welcome to the budget presentation. I'm Teresa Weatherhead. I'm the Area K elected official for, for Area K, not the village, but Aidan is our director for the village. And welcome to this budget presentation. So this budget presentation, Yev Maloff will explain how all that goes. And I'm just going to chair the meeting, whatever that really means for a meeting like this. I'm sure Yev can do it all. The following his presentation, we'll actually be taking questions from the public. And before we start, however, I'd just like to set up a few ground rules. These meetings are intended to present the proposed budget to you and allow you the opportunity to ask questions and seek clarification and to present any concerns you may have. But our expectation is that we are having just a respectful conversation about the budget and just trying to remain on subject with the budget. And it's not my expectation that anything, we'll go into other comments too much, but just in fairness, it's just important that everyone understands our ground rules. And I hope you enjoy. If you enjoy budgets, then I hope you enjoy this.
All right, thank you. You two introduced yourselves.
Yeah, sorry.
Aidan.
Yeah, Aidan, for those of you who don't know, Aidan with Aaron Co. I'm a councillor with the village of Nakusp and the director for Nakusp on the regional district board.
Again, Teresa introduced yourself at the beginning. So, yes, thank you, Teresa. So my name is Yev Maloff. I'm the CFO of the regional district. I've been with the regional district about 2 years. So I'm here to present the budget or the draft budget for 2024. So this is part of our public engagement process. So I'll explain the budget process a little bit later on through my budget, and I'll just bring up the budget document for those online.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
No.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. So agenda tonight, we'll do a little bit of a services overview of the regional district. We don't assume everybody knows everything. And so talk about the regional district. We'll talk about a bit about that. General summary of how 2023 has gone. Property assessments and their impact. It's always a tricky and sometimes complex area, so we'll try to simplify that a bit. The overall outlook for 2024 from sort of the 20,000 foot level. We'll go through a service by service discussion and then look at some pie charts for sub-regional assessments and their impact, and budget impact. And just a reminder, this is a draft budget. The actual final budget will be adopted at the March 21st board meeting. So there's still some final entries for 2023 that are being made right now. And why those matter is because any adjustments to surpluses or deficits from last year have to be carried forward into this year's budget, so that can have an effect. There's still ongoing committee and commission level meetings. There's several this week that may impact the budget. And as well, these public information sessions, feedback from these sessions can also potentially have an impact on the final draft to be presented to the board. So a bit of a discussion about the regional district services model. So there's 186 services, and so but each service has to basically be accounted for individually, and surpluses and deficits cannot be transferred between services. So the big difference between one of the big differences between a regional district and a municipality is in a regional district, each service is sort of its own bucket, and it taxes itself. It's got its own requisition level for taxes, its own budget for costs and expenses and revenues. And when we do a budget, we can't budget a deficit or a surplus. It basically has to balance, and we can't move any extra funds from one service to the other. A municipality, for the most part, has got a big bucket of money, and they could allocate it as they see fit. For the most part, it's not 100% that way, but that's the big difference. So those 186 services could be put into about 8 buckets. So governance and administration, so that's the board of directors and the administrative function of the regional district. Resource recovery, which spans the entire regional district, all the municipalities, all electoral areas, and that includes waste management, recycling, and organics. Recreation and parks is another large one. Fire protection, sustainability, development, planning, and land use, building inspection, some water systems, and then funding of various societies and organizations, such as libraries, community halls, museums, and other services. So I'll stop every now and then and ask if anybody's got any questions. Just feel free to put your hand up, or if you're online, we're monitoring chat. So please either say something in chat and we'll try to address your questions. So any questions thus far? Good. Okay, so here's a map of the regional district. The left side doesn't have the electoral areas shown, but the one on the right does. So basically the regional district stretches from Yak in the south east up to Nakusp here in the northwest, and Argenta and further on the southwest, and down to Castlegar on the, that was on the northeast, and down to Castlegar on the southwest. So fairly large regional district. And the area to the upper left is Area K. So a fairly large area, not as densely populated as some of the others, but nevertheless a large area. and that red dot in the middle is the village of Nakusp. Just want to touch briefly upon the board strategic plan. So the new board was elected in the fall of 2022. So over the past year, they worked on updating the strategic plan for the board. And here's a slide showing the priorities that came out of that strategic planning process, and which was approved in December. So here are the 7 priorities. Under each one of these priorities is 6 or 7 objectives that further specify and define that priority. The strategic plan document, not already, should be available on the website fairly soon, and it details this out. The importance of the strategic plan is to help guide the board in its in its decision making priorities, as well as the regional district as a whole, to help guide work plans and priorities. So 2023 overview. So spending on wages, benefits, and services, and most other operating expenses came significantly under budget for 2023. Spending on wages is low because in many instances, if somebody leaves for another position in the middle of the year, it often takes a few months to fill that position. So we are underspent there. But in a budgeting process, it's virtually impossible to predict who's going to leave and when and in which service. So we can't just do some overall deduction and say, oh, we're going to take 10% off all wages in the budget, because if nobody leaves that particular service, then the funding is not going to be in place to pay those wages in that service. So the other thing that happens when staff members aren't there, so potentially services are curtailed. So if, for instance, lifeguards are not available, then where there's pools or things like that, hours will be cut back, or other staff are stretched to cover as a result, reduced staffing levels. And one of the bigger items is utilities construction crew was disbanded in 2023, mainly to the difficulty of hiring labor. And the utilities construction crew is basically responsible for, we have a number of water utilities, I believe about 20 or so, for replacing pipe or water pipe and such. So that was a bit of a pilot project. It didn't work out, so it was disbanded last year. So budget costs were lower, but on the other hand, user fees and other sales of services, for instance, building permits came under budget for 2023, so that balanced out a bit of the under cost effect. And capital project expenditures were under budget as well, but those are largely funded from borrowing and transfers from reserves to fund projects. So there's really no surplus or deficit effect there. And as a reminder, if there's a prior year surplus or deficit in service, it's carried forward to primarily to reduce taxation in future years. Any questions on that? Okay, we'll continue then. So we'll jump into property tax assessments then. So generally, smaller increases in 2024 compared to 2023. And reminder that this year's assessments are based on last year's July property values. So does that mean your taxation will change by the same amount? No, it doesn't. We'll talk about that. So assessment change for electoral area as a whole can be divided into 2, market and non-market change. So market change is basically the value that, okay, I'm just getting a message. People are chatting the meeting messages. Are you monitoring? Okay, just giving me a message. All right, apologies for that. Jump back to my presentation. So market change is if a property's gone up in value because generally, general overall real estate sales have driven up values. And what a non-market change is, if somebody builds a new home, they've added to the assessment base of the of that area or municipality. So that's what that's a growth of the assessment base, and now that home's got is added to the assessment base, but that's considered non-market. So new construction, renovation, subdivisions will increase the assessment base, but that's considered a non-market change in assessment. So how are annual property taxes for the regional district calculated? So on the left-hand side there, basically, so the tax requisitions are calculated. So what we do is we do a budget for every single service in the regional district. So we figure out the expenses required to run that service, any revenue items, and then calculate the tax required to fund that service. So we do that for those 186 services. And then the BC Assessment Authority on its, independently of that, does the assessments of all the properties in the regional district. And then that drives a tax rate per thousand for each individual service. So that's where that difference between municipalities and regional district comes into play. The municipality basically comes up with one tax rate as a whole for the municipality as a whole, and all that money goes in one bucket. The regional district comes combined with the property assessment, comes up with the tax rate for each service individually, and not everybody in the regional district participates in every service. We'll see a table of that later. Most people where they live participate maybe 10 to 20 or 25 services. So we'll look at that in a bit. So then you take that tax rate per thousand for each service, multiplied by the assessed value of each individual property, and that'll get you the property tax for each service for each property. And then you have to add all of those up. So I'll show an example in a few slides. Okay, so these are the assessment changes for all the electoral areas and the municipalities in the regional district. And so the two areas here of concern, so electoral area K, the total assessment change was 9%. Of that 9% change, 7% of that was due to market forces, but 2% was because of new builds or renovations. So more than 20%, over 25% of the assessment change was due to new construction. And in the Nakusp, a 6% increase, 5% due to market, and 1% to new construction. So I'm note here, so there's a difference between the Nakusp and K of 6 to 9. So why that matters is there's a lot of services that the Nakusp and K share in, either on a regional level or at a small level. And so the more the assessments go up in either municipality or a electoral area versus its partners, then it'll take a greater share of the taxes to run those services. So that's what's called an assessment shift. So if everybody's taxes go up by the same amount, then any change to that taxation will be spread evenly. But in this case, we've got a difference of 9 to 6. So any place where Area K and the Nakusp share services, Area K residents in general will pick up a greater share of any change in tax in that service. Any questions on this table or just what I've talked about?
Question on 9.
Sorry, okay,
A good question from, it says the pilot project that didn't work out, how much money was lost? How much did that account start with? What has happened to the equipment and how much exactly was lost? I'm assuming they're talking about the public utilities group.
right, yeah.
You want to leave that question to the end?
No, I'll take questions throughout the presentations. It's easier to do that way. So we don't have an exact number what's lost because we still own the equipment. We're hoping that we can break even on it. There's some loans for the equipment. Equipment costs have increased for used equipment. So this year, we're going to go through the process to sell the equipment. So there is no number of a loss. While the utilities crew was functioning, the actual costs of running the utilities crew, any construction we did was charged out to those particular water utilities when that work was done. So last year they didn't do any work. We had the decision was made mid-year to disband. So we're setting up to divest of that equipment. Okay, here's a chart, basically the chart form of the previous table.
I'm just going to
Sure.
back up to what you were talking about before. I don't know everybody's faces here, so if anybody's new to Area K, defined Area K is the portion that shares most of the services with the village of Nakusp. And so defined Area K is the area around the village of Nakusp that draws into Nakusp to use those services. Whereas if you were out in the southern region of Area K, Fauquier, Burton, Edgewood, Arrow Park, those areas, they draw more into the services of those areas. Like when we talk about a rec hall, Burtonites are going to pay taxation into their recreation hall, whereas people in defined Area K would pay taxation into recreation in the Nakusp arena. Sorry.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Teresa. Okay, so what this chart shows here is along the bottom are all the various areas and municipalities shortened. And the blue bars are the 1 year change in assessment. So from 23 to 24. And then the orange are the 8-year average. So if we look at this chart, so Nakusp is about a 6% increase in assessment and 8-year average just over 9. So this year it's come back a bit from its average. K is actually almost right at its 9-year average. But I guess the interesting thing to note about this this graph, and it sort of works out this way every year, you get a really wide range between of the blue bars. So from a -2 all the way up to almost a 15. So and it over the course of time, generally but not always, it'll shift which area or municipality is on the left-hand side versus the right. So like for instance, Nelson's seen some really high increases going back a few years. So they were on the left side and now sort of they've kind of come back to a mean and they're on the right side. And now some of the smaller communities last year and this year are now further away from the major centers are now seeing some of the greater increases in assessments. So so much wider range over 1 year versus 8. If you look at the orange bars over 8 years, and exclude Slocan, which is a bit of an outlier, there's only about a 5% variance in the if you look at an 8-year range. So any questions on that? Okay. So this is basically the assessment change. We just highlighting the Nakusp and Area K. a 6 and 9% increase. All right, so these are what we call the cover sheets. They are part of our budget package, both the consolidated one, which has all the areas and municipalities in the regional district, and as well on the web page for this meeting, a smaller version was uploaded just for Nakusp and Area K and the services that it participates in. So what this cover sheet basically shows, and this is for the Village of Nakusp, is all these services the Village of Nakusp pays into. And on the very left-hand side, those are the service numbers. We use those basically to as an identifier for those services. So in this case, we've got almost 20, not quite 16 to 17 services. And everybody in Nakusp, every property in Nakusp pays into these services. So that's the entire assessment for Nakusp. And what it shows is about a 7.5% gross increase in total dollar taxation for the village and Nakusp for regional district services. And so here is Area K. So this is the first half of the page for Area K, and I'll explain why in a minute. This goes back to Teresa's comments. So then these services on top are the list of services that every single property in Area K pays into. Doesn't matter where they're just north of Nakusp or they're way further south around Edgewood or the OK. So again, all the services it pays into, it's not an exact match. Nakusp doesn't pay into some of these, but most of them. Some of these are at some of these services are across the entire region. For instance, general administration, GIS, not entirely, some municipalities don't participate. But it's throughout the region. Some of these are smaller. For instance, the resource recovery, S188 is a sub-region. There's 3 sub-regions throughout the regional district. And some are just specific to K and Nakusp. So a service could span a very small area. For instance, a water utility might just be a few households, or waste services might be, well, they do span the whole region, but the service might be sub-regional.
Does anybody have any questions about some of these? They aren't what some of these names mean, or some of these?
So I will be going to most of these later on in the and explaining what's going on with them later on in the presentation. But if anybody's got any questions now, I can address them. Okay, so we'll move on then. Okay, so what's this? This is the second page of electoral area services. So now, if you notice here, now these assessments values are all different. So they range from, for instance, water utility burden, which is a fairly small amount, up to septic disposal, S190, and a few others. So what this means is that these are all defined areas. For each one of these services, a defined area that participates in that service. So when Teresa mentioned, for instance, K defined area, you'll notice a few of these services are up around the 37, it's actually 350, here it's $37 million level. So that means that area, for instance, the arena, the Nakusp, and the defined area of K share in that service.
Museum,
library is another one.
historical.
Yeah, cemetery. So there's a range there. And then the fire protection is provided by the village on the cusp and a smaller defined area outside the village on the cusp within the fire protection boundaries to that service. Any questions on that?
Septage, we don't actually, we have that service, but we don't pay for it in Cape.
Right, it's got a 0%. Yeah. So the tax rate, which is the rate per thousand of assessment, so relatively small increases for the cusp and area K. And so again, the reason that area K's rate is quite a bit smaller, there's a fairly large portion of area K properties fall outside of the defined service area for those services that it shares with the village and the cusp. Okay, so this is the taxation change table. So lots of numbers there, but I would just focus on the far left, which shows the area, and the municipality, and the far right, which shows the percentage change. And this is in total, based on total dollars of taxation. As you can see, we've actually got a decrease in Silverton, and the largest increase is in Area D. A lot of Area D's increase is driven also by having the largest increase in assessment up there. So Area K again, showing about a 9% increase in taxation in dollars. So that's gross. You can probably knock a couple percent off for new construction. So current property owners will probably see an increase of about just over 7%. And village and the cusp about a 7.5. If you knock a percent off for new construction, you're looking at about a 6.5% increase in regional district taxes for the village and the cusp existing property owners.
Can you explain the other red column, the total taxation 2024? What do those figures mean?
So those are the total tax requisition dollars for each area municipality that will be requisitioned this year. So the overall outlook for 2024, so about a 9% total increase in requisitions, but 7.9 once you remove the non-market assessment changes. The CPI, or Consumer Price Index, increase on staff salaries and director stipends is 6.2%. This is this is a catch-up from prior years because we effectively use a 2-year average to calculate that. So those increases are part of the terms and conditions of employees with our non-exempt staff. So when somebody's hired, that's part of that. And for stipends, director stipends is in bylaw that was brought into effect before the new board was elected. And so the question was asked, well, that is 6.2, is that a reasonable number, or is using inflation a reasonable thing to do? So we looked back over the last 7 years and the last 24 years for the wider public sector, and wages have basically kept up with inflation in using the BCGU as a proxy. So what you may be hearing in the news right now is that BCGU and the public sector in BC is looking at about a 3% increase for this year, but they got over 6.7% last year. So the regional district is about a year behind its wage increases versus the BCGU. So inflation and supply chain constraints are going to continue to have cost impact across many services and initiatives. And as you probably noticed in your household, there's lots of things that you buy that actually exceed published inflation rates. So I talked with our projects manager last week, and he did make a note of that many construction services and construction supplies and other supplies are still increasing 10, 15, 20 or more % per year. And there's a bunch of things driving that, supply chain constraints and such. One thing he mentioned, a lot of our contractors that work on our projects, if they've gone out and borrowed to purchase equipment, not only has the cost of the equipment gone up because of inflation, but in recent interest rate increases, they're now paying more to service their loans or leases, and they're having to pass that on in their bids on our projects. So interest rate increases are also continuing to put pressure both on our short-term and long-term borrowing costs. There's a partial offset from increased investment income, but basically our increased investment income flows into our reserves, so that the reserves basically an attempt to keep them up with inflation, but we are noticing slippage there as well. And so we're also continuing work on implementing our asset management planning and program. So we're expecting an external consultants report in the next few months that'll help guide our asset management planning. So any questions on this slide? Okay. And just strategic plan alignment. So focus on that. So the main objectives: effectiveness and efficiency of operations, transparency, engagement with the public, continued focus on core service, and then managing assets and service delivery in a fiscally responsible manner. So we'll go through some of these services in a bit more detail, talk a bit what's going on with them. So S100 is our general administration service. Both Nakusp and Area K pay into it. So this includes our corporate administration, which looks after all the legalese, the running all of our meetings, the risk management, insurance. Then we have finance, information technology, HR, the CAO, and the municipal directors. So the 6.2 wage increase applies to this and most of our other services. CRA increased the mileage rate to 70 cents per kilometer, so that'll have a bit of an effect. So catch-up training. So the next one's a fairly large item. So increased spend on IT, cybersecurity, and the transition to Microsoft 365. So we just use this as a bit of an example of what inflation, the change in the environment's doing. So 8 years ago, Regional District for Office software went out and bought Office 2016. We've been using it for 8 years. It's a one-time purchase up front. You pay whatever, $300 or $400, use it for 8 years. So you're looking at $40 or $50 a year per employee. So 2 or 3 years ago, 2 years ago, Microsoft 365 said, we're no longer going to support that product. You're at risk. If you continue using it both from a security perspective and from a usability perspective, you basically have to move to 365. So we went through a bit of a project, look at other options, Google and some other freeware and other options. So we presented a report to the board that 365 was basically the recommended option. So what's the big change now? So basically now on an annual basis, we're having to pay between $200,000 and $250,000 in license fees versus about half of that once every 8 years. So that's having considerable impact on our costs. And so other software vendors are noticing this. So anybody who's selling you software is now saying, you're not going to buy it once, you're going to pay for it every year. And so that's definitely having an impact on our costs. So yes, we look at all our other options, look at them. There's a cost of transition. And if everybody's going that direction, doesn't mean anybody's, there's going to be a cheaper option. And of course, cybersecurity continues to be a growing risk. So our resources required to address that are also increasing. In the budget, $70,000 for, oh, we have a public question. I can see it, so I will answer it because we just talked about that. So for office, in order to keep costs at a low level as possible, we looked at 3 licensing levels. One that's basically the a full version, and then for depending on the workers, there's what's called a frontline version, and then we've got email-only users. So we're looking at, I believe, just over 400 users in total for that. So even somebody who's working in a transfer station, they need access to our environment, even though they're not using Office or anything like that. They require a license. So that person requires a license, but that license costs less than somebody working at in an office and is using all the applications. So Office 365 is not just your Office applications. It includes a bunch of security applications. It includes the Teams licensing for video conferencing, and also all your connection license to be able to connect to services. So I hope that answers that question. And so next item, so we are working on completing the website. So the board approved $70,000 to complete that. So we recently went to RFP. We received a number of proposals. So hopefully by April, we hope that selected supplier to complete that, and the plan is to complete the new website by the end of the year. And so the year-over-year taxation increase in general limits about 11%. Yes.
Well, before you go further, there's a follow-up question on the breakdown cost for each level of.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. So it varies. In the first year, we get a bit of a discount. So and I'm not sure whether we're under, what do you call it, NDA on this, but so the full version is, let's say, in the low 40s per month. Frontline versions are generally running at about 20, sort of that $15 to $20 level, and then email only, I'm going to say somewhere $5 to $10. So quite a spread. So we've gone through basically the entire staff, IT's met all the departments, and we're getting close to getting everybody in the buckets they need to be in to complete this transition.
Okay, thanks.
Any questions from anybody here on this? Yes.
So that's sort of the breakdown for this year, right? So going forward, is there a multi-year plan for this, or can they just come next year and say, okay, this has all gone up 30% or whatever?
They could at some point. We would hope a competitor would come in and offer you a better value. So I mean, we're getting sort of the best government pricing. So our cost is probably the government rate. I don't know, about 15% less than or a little bit more than what a business gets. But yeah, this is one thing we're noticing is where price takers in a lot of these areas. Is there a ceiling? Yes, probably at some point. Some other model or something else would come in, and we would just have to bite the bullet and say, we're not going to use Microsoft anymore. We're going to use this other product, even though it doesn't have all those capabilities. And we, at that point, would have to make a decision and say, yes, there's going to be some impact on productivity or on training new users, but overall it's a net positive for the regional district. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But I mean, yeah, we're dealing with, again, with a large company that answers to its shareholders, and but hopefully they're also cognizant of the potential effect of competitors. Answer the question somewhat.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a potential we don't stay with it if it far exceeds its value.
Now, is there any plan in the works to look at other alternatives in the meantime?
We did that last year, and we looked at the some of the costs and benefits of doing so. So the cost is what you pay is going to be less, but then training new users to work in a completely new environment and not have all the features available, as well as from an IT administrative perspective, it didn't balance out. So does that have the potential to shift? Yes, it does, but at this current state, and the discounts were being offered as a government entity, Microsoft 365 made the most sense.
Right.
Okay. Next service, so rural administration. So this, Nakusp isn't part of this. So this is the rural director expenses, fire services, regional fire services overhead, and bylaw services. So the 6.2 increase. Good news story here is we've been awarded a $474,000 UBCM fire training grant to support wages, equipment, and other training costs for firefighters, which doesn't really affect this area because there is no there's no rural fire service in sorry, an RDCK run fire service in Area K.
And we're able to give grants to our fire brigades, so it doesn't cost any taxation to give them those same benefits of getting trained for first responders. So our Burton, Fauquier, and Edgewood fire brigades, so we'll be giving them grants. That's how we keep taxation low by still offering a service, we just can't, it's just not quite as robust of a service as you would get here in Nakusp.
All right, so 15% total increase in requisitions, mainly driven by full staffing complement in bylaw and fire services. And it includes 75,000 for fire services command unit to be funded from reserves. So most of those regional fire services are allocated out to the individual fire departments. So Area K is paying a very small amount into the regional fire service. So building inspection, service 103. So permit revenue is definitely off from the peak 2021, 2022 years. But mainly driven by lower construction values. And we've updated the building bylaw fees for fees and charges and some service levels. There's been a fair amount of turnover in building inspection over the last few years, which has affected service delivery. So it seems we have a fairly consistent staff now. So we're onboarding, supporting customer service improvements, including looking at some online delivery for building permit applications and monitoring of building applications, and digitization projects underway. Planning S104, so this is K only, not a cusp. So operations stable and on budget, receiving provincial funding to address new housing regulations, which are coming into force, and a number of projects that are being worked on in the planning department. GIS service, so a slight decrease to taxation. Operations are stable. Services continuing to establish new funding models to fund internal and external projects. And also looking at, there's going to be assessment done to help advance the technology capabilities and utilize previously acquired data assets. One of the biggest services for people that aren't aware of GIS they provide is there's a regional district web map that's available online. You can basically go look at that in any number of different ways by electoral area, look at individual properties. You can't see who the user is, but you can see roughly where the property lines, how many properties are, where they are. Various other services utilize that web map, for instance, fire services, recreational services. So GIS is an important aspect of the regional district, providing those mapping services both to the external public, which includes residents, realtors, other businesses, as well as fire services, emergency services, recreational and park services.
Yeah, there's a question online.
Sure.
It says the services are already provided before at the provincial level. Why is it necessary to duplicate services?
Service at is not. It's more than it does more than duplicate the provincial level services. So the GIS services provided for the regional district is a lot of the services specific to the regional district is linked to various applications and is linked to various uses, whether again it's Rex Park or fire. They get information that's not available at a provincial level to them.
We also get zoning, our zoning is on there if you want to check
Right.
out zoning in your neighborhood, things like that. We don't have that on a provincial level.
There are other questions. Do you see them or do you want to?
Can you please read them? They scroll up my screen.
Sure. There's one, well, I don't know if it's true or not, but not according to your GIS staff. I don't know what that's referring to, presumably the duplication.
Oh, could you not use ALR property locator GIS? ALR property locator?
Okay, I'm not familiar with that, but it's probably an ALR map somewhere.
Yeah, we have ALR on our GIS.
And there's a comment that just says IMAP.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but I know the problem. We can't link our various databases and such to the provincial GIS. Okay, community sustainability. So this is Area K, only Nakusp. So various projects, including protection of drinking water and watersheds. So watershed governance initiative, providing support for groundwater monitoring and partnerships for Spokane Cooney Lake, and then the climate action planning function. So over the course of last year, there was a public engagement, which included, I believe, about 13 public meetings, and as well as an online site. So there was a redraft of the climate action plan, incorporated that, sort of went through that process, and continued having annual reporting through the climate action plan. Community sustainability continued, so some food and agriculture initiatives, as well as energy. Was there another question there, Aidan?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, so emergency management. So it's Service A 101, and for Area K Nakusp, it's funded through Service 159, but A 101 is the regional service. So basically, this is the regional agency that's responsible for planning and to prepare prepare for the potential of seasonal flooding, wildfires, and drought. So lots of focus over the last few years on this service. Also were really received focus on by the, if those aren't aware, the new Emergency Disaster Management Act came into effect last year. So this is going to have a fairly major impact on our planning, risk assessment, and coordination consultation for both emergency planning and management. So this will require updated bylaws, policies, procedures, documents, and aligning to new regulations. Emergency management also looks after the neighborhood emergency preparedness programs throughout the regional district, Fire Smart, continuing revision of community wildfire resilience plans, and various allocations. Okay, we'll jump into West Resource Recovery. So again, this is looking after waste management, recycling, and organics. So the West is a sub-region, goes from Castlegar through the Slocan Valley and up to Jennifer, Nakusp, and Area K. So 4% increase in taxation and a 10% tipping-free increase. So our waste services, resource recovery services are funded by a mix of taxation and tipping fees. So there's some of the projects this year for that service are legacy landfill assessments. So what legacy landfill assessments are there's landfills that date back 40, 50, or 60 or more years. And as part of provincial regulation, even though some of them predate the regional district is responsible for doing assessments and making sure that those landfills aren't going to fall outside regulation. And so those assessments are starting this year, and those assessments will come planning to deal with those legacy landfills. So other assessments on existing landfills, active ones, will take place at Udishania and Nakusp. So the hydrological assessments, and then a design, operations, and closure plan for the Udishania landfill. So when you're operating a landfill, it's not as simple as it looks, just digging a hole in the ground and burying garbage. It's highly regulated, and we have to plan 50 or 60 years ahead about how we're going to plan and manage that landfill and how we're going to close it. And then after we close it, how we're going to manage that landfill for another 30, 40 years past closure. So we're actually maybe looking even 100 years ahead of time. So you just can't bury the hole, leave it, and be done with it. That plan is being worked on currently. Transfer station upgrades and construction is planned this year for Slocan, Roseberry, and Nakusp. And last year, the Central West Compost Facility just outside of Salmo began operations in Q3 of last year. So why does that matter for residents of Nakusp and Area K? Well, what it does is it removes that our composting facilities remove organic waste, so-called waste, from landfills. So the reason organic waste is bad for landfills is that it causes leaching, produces various gases, I believe like methane gas and such, and pollution, and it significantly decreases the lifespan of a landfill. So as waste gets shifted to Udishania and we shift away the organics from there, we extend the lifetime, therefore the cost of operating that landfill. So I'll take a break now and ask if there's any questions on this from the previous slides.
So I thought that our landfill was scheduled to be closed this year.
Yes.
Okay, so can you tell us what the cost difference is going to be with running, the difference between running a landfill in town here and shipping all our garbage to Castlegar? And how that is going to help the planet driving trucks back and forth to Castlegar with loaded and unloaded with garbage?
All right, good question. Do you guys want to take a stab, or I could as well?
Well, I think, okay, so apparently it is a less cost. And I mean, I've sat through plenty of these meetings over the years. It's actually a pretty complex conversation. It's trucking, that was my biggest worry too, was the shipping. We're already shipping all kinds of things. We're already shipping from transfer stations in Edgewood and Burton. And so the idea would be that going forward, eventually we would hope to be diverting some of the waste here as well. I think we were looking at about 36% is organics that we could be diverting here and not having to ship. So currently the cost to keep this dump open and the cost we would have to completely expand this landfill because it's at end of life. And so it does come down to the almighty dollar. And the amount of, I'm not really quite sure the amount of shipping that we are already doing is, apparently it didn't end up being the same. We're still shipping, or we're still
You have
shipping.
numbers, you know?
I don't know.
We don't have the numbers here, but
Because we're only a year out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not, I don't have the numbers comparing the two. But if you want to leave your name and contact information after, I can get our resource recovery staff to send you those numbers or the reports that recommended that.
Right, because the thing is that, like, I've experienced this going to the recycling, for example, and sometimes the bins are full and you can't put anything in them. So, because they don't pick them up in a timely fashion. So how are we going to be guaranteed that our garbage is going to be picked up in a timely fashion?
So we have two different services that we're talking about.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, you
Yeah.
know, like.
So what's happened there would have been to do with the freight company that was hired. Recycling is a provincial program, that's not us. But we do have to, and we did have shipment problems with that particular company. And so it will be the same sort of efficiency as our transfer stations already are, which have been very efficient, and there has never been any issues with the shipping of our garbage. So, and there's still going to be room to dump garbage. It won't be the same as recycling. Those bins are quite small in comparison to what we'll be looking at, and there will be extra containers for garbage there. So it's just going to be a continual thing.
Okay, so how's that gonna look, like on a personal level? Am I still buying, town garbage bags and?
I don't know how the village does their operation, for, I guess you would know. But yeah, our rural users, they don't have garbage pickup like you do in the village because that's a village service, not in, that's not a.
So is there somebody that can answer that question?
Ours won't change our service.
Yeah, is that answered?
I have a question.
Sure.
I moved here from close to Nanaimo and was part of a recycling process and research into what could be done when capping off the landfill for Nanaimo, which was in Cedar. And what they did was actually they tapped it in order to get energy. Like they took off energy for heating buildings and methane gas for this and that. And I'm wondering if there's any research that's been done on that here.
Yeah, because yes, definitely that is the thing, because we discussed it, waste resource recovery meetings is It's very, very costly to do that though, and for the amount of population to pay into the cost of doing that to get so they're talking with Fortis BC on that level, but it's actually, we don't have the amount to warrant the cost for that. So we don't have the amount of I guess residents and the landfills are not at the same size as a landfill like in Nanaimo. So yeah, so
That is not population level.
yeah, we do. There is definitely always discussion of things like that. What can we do better? We're always discussing that. So thank you.
Who's driving the regulation on these landfills?
That would be,
The province, yeah, through the waste management. Sorry, environmental management.
yeah,
So increased regulation is increasing the cost, downloading the cost to us to meet their new requirements.
Yeah.
We've been using landfills forever.
Yeah.
Where all the garbage go 100 years ago.
well, sometimes it just ends up in people's backyards around here.
Yeah, there's a number of legacy landfills, but as we move forward in the future, there's less and less places that you can just go put a landfill. Nobody wants one in their backyard or whatever other costs involved to open one. If somebody really is really interested in all the details of running resource recovery services, all our both our sub-regional and our entire regional resource recovery meetings are available to the public and are available remotely. So for instance, the budget for the just this sub-region, so there's 3 different sub-regions, there was 2 public budget meetings, and I believe each one of them went on for several hours. So they went through line by line by line by line for every expense, every cost, and discussion with the directors on those. So that level of detail is available and open to the public, and on a regular basis, the joint resource recovery meetings, they go through all of these sort of topics that we're talking about today. Reports are brought forward to discuss this, items as that vetting recovery, about building new transfer stations, about plans for closing landfills, transitioning to something else. So all of that information is available on a regular basis. If somebody's got some particular questions and that we're unable to answer tonight, then feel free to reach out to us. You can contact with somebody in resource recovery and they'll be able to address those questions.
There's a couple of questions online.
Sure.
As a power generating facility, or that's something that we're to research recovery.
That we need to, that would have to go to the, well,
And then there's a question about reimbursement from Recycle BC.
Great question.
yeah,
How many years, apparently we have not been reimbursed by Recycle BC for recycling. How many years has this been a thing and how much are we owed?
Okay, good question. I'll rephrase it or answer it is Recycling BC does reimburse us. We do get funds every year, but I believe it only covers about 20% of our actual cost of running recycling. So this is an item of contention between the regional district and Recycle BC. So regional district does approach and lobby the government and through, like, for instance, the Union of BC municipalities, that the unfairness of that program, and basically a downloaded cost on the regional districts and municipalities for recycling. So I believe it's about correct me if I'm wrong if you guys know, about $1 million a year annual deficit that recycling services are underfunded by Recycle BC. So the taxpayers in the regional district are covering that deficit.
And just quick follow-up, for how many years?
Well, I've only been here 2 years, so I can only speak for the last 2, but it's been an ongoing issue. I can't tell you how big of a problem it was 5 years ago, but or how much it's grown, but that's the level we're at this year.
And Chuck is saying that the federal government offers a green bond. Do you know anything about that? No, I'm not familiar with that either. But if you can. Okay.
Okay, we'll move on to recreation service, a joint service, S228. So the maximum taxation for this service is $28,125. So that's for the service establishment bylaw. And so that's the taxation for this year. It's going through some changes and assessments how to balance direct programming versus granting to recreational organization. So last year, some of the grants went to Music in the Park, Burton Community Association, OK, and a number of others.
So if any of you are interested, the Rec 4 grants come out of that. So that's for recreation projects and things here, and you can apply to that Recreation number 4 granting commission.
Okay. Okay, so there's a number of contribution services in Area K Nakusp that contribute to various organizations and services, so including the Arrow Lakes Historical Archives, the Nakusp Museum, so that one's at the maximum requisition, the Cusp District Sports Complex, which is for the most part the arena. So a fairly large, one of the larger services. We're missing a digit on the end of 2024 there. It's not $45,000, it's $451,000. And the Cusp Cemetery and the Cusp Library. We'll go over some of the water utility services that basically service a fairly small defined area, a number of users that access those services. So Burton Water is looking at a 15% user fee increase and 6.6% in parcel tax, mainly due to fund aging water line replacement over the coming years, as well as some well rehab and pump replacement work this year. Edgewood Water, 6% user fee and 10% parcel tax increase, including some work at on a standby generator. And Bouquet is 10 and 10 for inflation and to fund future water line replacements. Area K, so the fire protection service, it's a defined area, basically a contract with the Nakusp Fire Services, and based on that contract, there's a 5.6 increase in requisition. Emergency 911, so the regional district is responsible for funding emergency 911 services for most of the regional district, except a few of the larger municipalities. So the regional district taxes residents and then uses that taxation to pay service providers. So the two large service providers for 911 is 911 dispatch. So when you call 911, it goes, somebody in the South Okanagan Dispatch Center picks it up and routes that call either to fire, ambulance, police, or whoever. And so the cost of that service contract is going up fairly significantly this coming year. And then for fire dispatch, again, it does affect here because of dispatch for the village. So the cost of that is also increasing. So some information services, software, and then $45,000 for GIS services to integrate next generation 911 are coming up in 2024. So next generation 911 is there's been a change in how 911 operates. It used to be an analog-based service, so it moved to a digital-based service. Basically, I don't fully understand it, but it's just basically upgrading the equipment so it better integrates with various systems, and whether it's GIS or dispatch, and also integrates better with mobile phone users. And I don't know if it's available yet, I don't think so, but for instance, in the future, you might be able to text 911 or provide different types of information than you could over a voice call. But having said that, the interesting that's changing is 911 services are partially funded by 911 levy on landlines. That revenue is decreasing over time because less and less people have landlines. And there's no similar levy on mobile phones. And there doesn't, as much as we'd like to see a levy on mobile phones, there doesn't seem to be a big push at higher levels to make that happen. So taxation will be increasing the service, both for the contract costs and for the decrease in 911 levy revenue. So transit, Kootenay Lake West, transit service S239 is one of the 3 transit services in the Kootenay West area. So Nakusp area care included. There was a fair amount of reserves in this service. So 100,000 of it was used to offset an increase in operating costs for contractor wage increases to facilities, etc. So the transit services are always going through an assessment this year. And if you sat in some of the transit budget meetings, you'll see it's a fairly complicated apportionment formula, 3 different services where all crisscross each other. So where the regional district is looking at the potential combination of those services into one and have one more transparent apportionment formula.
Overall, we have the least cost for our transit services because we have the least amount of transit service.
Okay, so any questions on any at this point before I jump into these pie charts? Okay, what these pie charts do or show is basically at a graphical perspective the proportion of taxation going to each service that the area participates in. And on the left-hand side is the regional district tax bill per $250,000 of home value. So if your home's assessed at 500, you double it, 750, triple it. So residents in the village of Nakusp or property owners, the largest portion of your taxes go, regional district taxation goes to arena operations, and the rest is broken up fairly equally over about a dozen other services, including the library, resource recovery, transit, one of them, and emergency planning and general admin and animal control. So any questions about village and Nakusp?
I have a question about
Sure.
whether your PowerPoint is available to be printed out.
It will be available.
Brain doesn't-
Yeah, there's lots of information here. So the PowerPoint, so the web page, if you go on our calendar and click today, which is the 4th, there's a meeting page for this meeting, so the Nakusp Area K budget meeting. Tomorrow, so currently the detailed budget is available there. This presentation in PDF form will be available on that web page by the end of tomorrow.
The other thing is that there was another meeting in Nelson, I guess, on bylaw changes that I was interested in. I was torn between the two of them.
Oh, okay.
It started at 6:30. So it's in conflict with this one.
Okay, well, this one's much more important. So. No, I shouldn't say that, but, yeah, and good point. It's, so many services and committees and commissions in the regional district. And this is sort of the busiest time of the year, and trying to schedule among directors and everybody else committee commission meeting. We try to do our best not to have those overlaps, but good reminder, and we'll take that into consideration and maybe try book the budget meetings way ahead of time next year.
Yes, yes. It's great to see so many people.
Yeah.
I think.
All right.
I was
I'll make
really
it.
surprised that we pay more for the library than we do for refuse. Good
Yeah.
to see it on a pie chart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's next? So Area K, define Area K, who is in the vicinity of fire protection from the village of Nakusp. So here's your tax bill, awesome, fire protection, just under 45% of your tax bill. Arenas there, and a bunch of the other similar services, including the refuse, planning and land use, rural admin, and general intake, and the library. But as you can see, your total dollar tax bill for $250 is also up considerably for somebody versus people in the village of Nakusp. But people in the village of Nakusp also have their village of Nakusp taxes that go on top of that. And everybody on top of these also has school taxes, hospital taxes, and all those other things. So we're just talking about regional district portion of your tax bill tonight.
Sorry, just so
Sure.
this is, so I live in Burton, so I'm obviously paying towards the coastal library. Yes?
No,
No, so
No.
Oh, sorry, I thought it said, no?
no,
where this is,
this is defined area.
Oh, okay.
yeah, so this doesn't, so if you're not within the fire protection, you're outside this area, so we'll look at,
That's what it
you'll be one of the next few graphs coming up.
Okay.
be good if the header it said defined area K, that's kind of how we,
Mm,
yeah.
right, but these, yes,
Oh, no,
it is
there's no
defined,
overlap.
but all of these areas are actually defined in their own way. So we could call it defined fire protection area K or so here's somebody in Edgewood who does not have fire protection from the does not participate in the arena. Now a whole bunch of smaller services become a big chunk of their taxes. For instance, street lighting. What else do we have there? Their fire brigade. And now some of the regional services now become a little bit larger, like rural admin, general admin, and a few others. But as you can see, some of the small rural communities now are focused on some of their utility services such as street lighting. And this water should be there somewhere. I don't know that. I can't.
I don't see it.
All right, so maybe a very small. Emergency planning, I
Oh, but you
will,
know what, that's a user.
it's
per
user, so it would be on
per
here, it's
user.
not
Yeah,
based on
oh.
assessment. All right, thank you, Teresa, for bringing that up. So that's an it's not an assessment-based service, so it's not gonna show up in here. Okay, so somebody, okay, so they have their fire brigade, a community hall, and a few other smaller services. So you can see how their tax bill shifts to other services versus, for instance, Edgewood or somebody in defined area K living here. And their tax base, but their tax bill relatively low as well for $250,000 of home value. I think there's one more. Okay, Burton. Here we are. So Burton Hall now becomes a reasonable chunk of your tax bill. The resource recovery, refuse, some emergency planning. So now some of these regional services become a larger portion of your tax bill. Planning and land use, rural and general admin. On the other hand, your tax bill is the lowest of all the areas we talked about, at, just over $200 per $250,000 of home value.
And that planning and land use, so is that in reference to what you had mentioned, that there were a lot of changes? And that was going to be,
Oh, there's two there. No, that's emergency planning.
Yeah.
So, but there, you're right. There's actually a lot of changes in both planning and land use. Changes in the driven by the BC Housing Act, or changes to that. And emergency planning has quite a few changes driven by the Emergency Disaster Management Act.
Okay. And you don't have your fire brigade right now is not on taxation. They would kind of like to be, but that's something, if you want that service, that's something that can.
right, we talked about that.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's it. So any other questions or anything we presented tonight, either myself or Aidan or Teresa?
That was very good. Does everybody have a good concept of what we talked about in terms of their own area, how it applies to them? Don't ever hesitate to reach out to me personally if you want to.
So you mentioned investments. How much do you guys actually invest on a yearly basis, and what sort of returns do you get back?
Good question. So it varies. So, our cash fund gets a peak in August because when you pay your property taxes, residents or property owners pay their property taxes in June or early July, whatever the cutoff is. The province gives us one big pile of money. We get that in August, and then we use that to fund our services until the next time we get our taxes. So we don't have a lot of opportunity to use that taxation to invest in longer term instruments that might earn more money. So our total investment position might peak at somewhere around $50 million, and it'll drop down to maybe 20 million or so. And so our investments are basically guided by the Local Government Act and the Community Charter. It says we can't invest in anything risky, and investments have to be liquid enough to fund services. So we have to do some cash management. But the main thing is is protecting the principle of those investments. So we can't invest in the stocks. We can't invest in risky bonds or things like that. So we have several groups of investments. So the regional district, we keep a $20 to $30 million of reserves that we have to keep to fund future projects and that are allocated to specific reserves. So what we do with that is at least a third of it we have in laddered GICs over a 5-year period. So every 6 months we just buy the largest return GIC and keep turning it over every 6 months. So in those latter GICs, we still have some that are only earning 1.5% because they go back 5 years. Our latest ones are over 5%. So that's our latter GICs. And then because our cash flows up and down, or our cash position varies greatly through the year, and we can't even really put that into GICs, is we negotiate a deal with our financial institution to get, we're well over 5% now on basically our operating account. So there's, with the major Canadian financial institution, so we're not having to try and find all these short-term GICs and keep moving money around. We said, look, we want to do that. We've got a very substantial financial position. We're a government entity. What can you do for us? and they came to the plate, and we're earning I think a fairly good interest rate on the funds of the regional district. So any recent investments where cash is over 5. Some of the 5-year GICs now are starting to drop off. So I think we hit one at 5.2 last year. Now the 5-year GICs, because predicted inflation is supposed to go down, are dropping off to sort of the 4.5, 4.7% level.
So the majority of the investment portfolio is either guaranteed or extremely low risk.
Exactly, yeah.
Do you have a corporate bond portfolio, or
No.
you just is completely
Yeah,
GICs and
GICs and some investments through the MFA, which is the Municipal Finance Authority, which is a AAA rated. That's where we do, we borrow our money through the Municipal Finance Authority, but then they also provide some investment vehicles for us.
So you're not risk takers then?
So we're not risk
That's
takers, and we can.
I'm glad to hear you.
Yeah, we can't be by virtue of regulation. Now, there are some larger municipalities, I think like in the Lower Mainland, have such massive levels of reserves. They are trying to push that envelope or asking the province to relax some of that because they feel they can, even 1% increase with a slightly riskier asset would make a huge change in their investment income, but we're not pushing that envelope.
Okay, good.
Question from online.
Yeah.
Do we have a current total in cash and short-term investments? And this is last year was around 51 million. What are they currently?
I don't have the number off the top of my head, so it would be at this point in time, we'd be slightly below that.
And then can the investment pooled fund be re-injected to lower tax on residents?
No. Okay. Yeah. So the investments are there. So services are taxed through requisitions. These pooled funds basically are all assigned to either fund the reserve or to fund a service over the period of the year. In some years, depending when we're making payments and when projects happen, we potentially also have to borrow funds or could potentially borrow funds in May or June in July before we receive the tax revenue. So if our spending is even throughout the year, we're okay. If a bunch of projects happen early in the year, then we have to borrow. So there isn't this sort of unallocated pool of money we can just use to reduce taxation. The funds are either allocated to fund reserves or to fund the services.
Things like equipment replacement.
Yes, so each service will have a budget for equipment replacement, and that equipment replacement is either going to be funded from reserves or potentially borrowing, and then we have to fund that borrowing over a period of time through tax requisition, and including the principal payment and the interest on that borrowing. So we rarely directly tax to buy equipment. So we'll either build up reserves to buy it, or we will borrow and then pay down. And that's just so we don't have these large spikes in tax requisition, because if if you're going to go buy a $500,000 truck to haul waste, it would have a significant impact on that service that year. So we smooth our capital purchases over a period of time by either using reserves, and we pay to reserves at sort of an even level, or we borrow and then pay off that borrowing at an even level over a period of years.
There's another question online. It says, this is double over the previous year. What is the reasoning for investing these amounts, 25 to 50 million? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, all our funds are always invested. It's not like, we're not taxing to, well, I should back up there. I guess if the approved budget has an increase in reserves or an increased contribution to reserves, then yes, our investments will go up and in those reserves. So potentially, yes, there could be an increase. But that'll be driven by that taxation. That increase will be see those funds in August when the province remits their funds to us.
Oh, so he's saying, the public person, they are saying 2021 was 25 million, 2022 was 50 million.
So there's I can't speak to that exactly. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I do know, so I'm not sure whether we're talking investments in total or reserves, what it is. But 2020, 2021 those were the pandemic years. So I'm speculating here. There was a significant increase in the budget for those years. Requisition services were curtailed. So there would have been a reduced amount of requisition to fund services. And I'm guessing as well, we probably dipped in some reserves to fund those services. So reducing reserve levels also would have reduced our total investments. So again, sort of an educated guess, but I can't say that for certain.
Their last comment was pretty consistent levels around 25 million until 2022.
Okay, I'm down with that.
Yeah.
And I joined the RD in 2022, so
Yes.
I don't have the history in my head.
These are the numbers.
Oh, I thought it was.
All right, thank you. I'll have a look at that.
Does he want to, can you ask the public to leave a contact, give us a contact?
Okay, any other questions?
Well, I just have to say this is the best turnout I've ever seen in the budget, emergency state budget meeting. Thank you all very much for coming. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much. Great to see everyone here.
And a big thanks to you.
Yes.
And we've seen you present questions, and I'm just speaking personally from to answer all these questions. This command of this information is impressive. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks everybody online. Okay, great, everyone, have a safe drive home tonight.